Well,
Okay.
it's inevitable. We couldn't hide from this forever. I know we've spent at least an episode or two not talking about the current leader of the United States of America. Some people would even question the term leader, de facto, based on his title,
Yeah.
not necessarily his qualities or character. But today, we address the question, is Donald Trump racist?
Heck yeah. Let's do it.
And we being me, Andy Swindler.
And hello, I'm Brendan McNamara. I think it's one it's fun. By all means, of course, keep barreling through with the intro as you wanted to frame it. I did think it noteworthy to mention that this is a fun episode where neither of us have skin in one side of the game, meaning neither one of us has voted for Donald Trump for any office whatsoever at any point. So in some ways, I think a lot of times we were almost like a little bit on different sides of the seesaw. But I think in this point, I think we're both somewhere in the middle of the seesaw.
I did watch the first season of The Apprentice.
There you
Uh,
go. That's good. That's good prep.
um, and I think it's fair to say neither of us are fans of Donald Trump. Well, that may be obvious if we didn't vote for him, but even now, because this parts of this discussion may sound like we're interested in or open to or even intent on defending him, and that's not really the case. What we stand for here is truth. So, what is as a still some semi-progressive and uh, somebody who's drifted away from the woke movement a bit because it doesn't always represent truth. I will say what bothers me, a lot of what I see out in my cohorts,
Mm,
is just these sweeping blanket statements, and where it all gets rolled up. We don't like the guy, we don't like his policies, we broadly, and so then we're
yeah,
gonna
yeah,
like basically like transfer that to all of these character attacks and
yeah.
accusations, which may or may not be true. So I think the goal here is to say, well, are they true? Let's attack based on, if we're going to attack, let's have it be based on reality.
Yeah. Well, the thing I've noticed over years, again, I didn't vote for him the first time around, but I did start noticing there was a lot of reporting on him that was sort of defamatory. And I was like, oh gosh, that's awful he did that. That's awful he said that, blah, 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 blah. And then I started noticing, especially when I started paying more attention to the news in 2020, especially uh, how many of those things were false. So there was a lot of like, in some ways, I consider myself a defender of Donald Trump the same way I would consider myself a defender of anybody whose views in general I don't kind of vibe with. Um, Meaning the sort of innocent until proven guilty vibe that obviously I pick up through a United States of America citizenship bias that because other legal institutions around the world don't function on that same basis, but ours does, and I kind of like that. The sort of like giving someone the benefit of the doubt, even though I don't think of human nature as essentially good. I still value the idea of having to make the case really significantly demonstrable in order to proclaim a verdict. And I think the legal system is a great, still broken version, but it is a great like paradigm that I use in general. And I think most people do or should for their own adjudications as to what they would say about a person. That we should have a similar metric. So even if I don't like him, my pre thing as to whether Donald Trump is a racist is thumbs down. Is that I don't I have not I've just not seen sufficient evidence that if I was on the jury that I would be able to convict him of racism.
Yeah. My opening vote is I'm going to cheat and say thumb to the side. I really don't know.
Yeah,
If you look in one algorithm, he's clearly a racist. If you look in another, he's not. It's just like, you know, here we are. So that's what we're here to figure out. It's important, of course, as usual. We've spent literally multiple episodes defining terms before on one subject. Uh,
yes,
And we've spent quite a bit of time defining racism in other episodes, so we don't need to rehash all that.
Yes.
But suffice to say, uh, I still hold of this sort of dual and newer or novel sort of two-part definition of racism, where there's individual acts of between people who that are motivated uh, entirely or primarily by their race,
Yeah.
uh, which, as an aside, we believe race is a construct. I think we all know that actually to be true. That's one thing oddly everybody seems to agree on. Race is a construct, but then it's kind of like, well, what do we do with that construct? Is it important to still talk about that construct because it has, real implications or not? So on the one hand, there's individual, and on the other hand, there is in some cohorts the idea of systemic racism, and
Yeah.
that is not, I think, something that you hold, right? You're going with a more, I think the dictionary definition is more about the first version, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, because that's the more fundamental, because you can't have a system without individuals creating that system. And every system ultimately was typically created in the mind of one person. And then eventually someone joined them. Every once in a while, that can sort of pop up as like a whatever semi-magical collective consciousness way. But typically, everything starts with someone's idea. So it has to start individual. And this is why I agree that systemic racism existed and probably does exist in all sorts of ways, that, depending on the size of the system. Um, but to me, it's almost like the gender identity thing, that it requires what is it, a modifying word. So to me, I think you'd have to say systemic racism to refer to systemic racism. That if you just called it just racism, uh,
Right.
it's too confusing, and it's not primary if nothing else. So you can't hold it as, and I've had arguments with people in the past week about it. You can't hold that as the primary definition because it simply isn't. So you're violating the English language and what language is for in terms of intentional and clear communication between people. So, and especially here, this is the funny thing. I know a lot of people who believe systemic racism is either the primary or even sometimes even singular term, and yet they refer to Donald Trump as a racist. And an individual cannot be systemically racist definitionally. So it's sort of a second layer of semantic violation. So in this one, we have to focus on the first one. Because
Yeah.
if you just use the second, you could just say, well, everybody's racist. Doesn't matter their color, doesn't matter their age, doesn't matter their creed. That if you're in a fully, like, especially in the sense of like the system is systemically racist, well, then everybody is racist. Then
Well, that's
no one can be absent of that. In which case, calling someone racist is completely nonsensical. There'd be no like there'd be nothing distinctive to you. Wouldn't even use it as an insult because you're just like, well, it's just a fact or whatever. You wouldn't put alongside homophobe or transphobe or fascist or whatever, because it's just like, well, that's everybody. So this one has to be centered on the individual.
that's what Avenue Q taught us. Everyone's racist.
Everyone's racist, right?
Yeah, I want to go. I think I want to go individual too because that seems to be even if I can think of at least one potential argument for calling Donald Trump systemically racist, given his power to write executive orders that affect systems. That's sort of, I
Yeah.
think, the way in there. And it's like it gets messy, and it kind of is beside the point because I think when most people are criticizing him, yeah, to your point, they're saying he is racist. He, as a
This
human, as a
person.
single human being,
Yeah, this person.
has
Yeah.
has a problem with, people who are in the context of racial language, not white, not like him.
Yeah. Or any, I mean, you can be racist. A white person can be racist against white people. Um,
Well,
but it
that's
doesn't.
that's a good point. Maybe I'm making an
Yeah.
assumption.
Yeah,
That's
yeah. I mean, black people, I've met plenty of black people who are racist against black people. Oh my gosh, talk about Latinos. Yeah, I'm married to an Indian, and she is full of they Indians, my goodness gracious. You can move 400 miles to the north and people are like, "Yeah, we don't like those ones."
humans. All right.
People. Yeah.
So
Yes.
I'm gonna start by just reading. There's a Wikipedia article called "Racial Views of Donald Trump."
It's amazing.
This is kind of funny. I've never seen this little tag on the top of a Wikipedia article. It's got a little broom and it says, "This article may be too long to read and navigate comfortably." Like, they suggest splitting it up. So I did not read the
What?
whole thing. Oh
What
wow,
is that?
wow, that's a lot of pages. All right. Well, so I welcome anybody out there who is more research inclined, like my companion here, to read the whole thing. But we're just going to read the intro.
I like
And
that.
sometimes we do
Comfortable.
this because I do tend to be a little, more surface level in my research, focusing more on feeling and empathy. Not that you're not focused on empathy, but let's say I tend to focus more on feeling and anecdote. That's probably more fair.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and a lot of, and that's just the case right now. That's one of the biggest problems I think we address is that, okay, so many people are just reading headlines or just, and then that's something I've been working on actually as we've had this show is to get a little deeper or at least stop forwarding things I don't read. That's probably the worst habit I had before. It was just like, well, I sort of trust them, and that headline sounds pretty good. So yeah,
Yeah.
let's go
Can you
ahead and
believe this? Yeah.
pass it on. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. The shock and umbrage train. Yeah. We all fall into thanks to the algorithm.
Yeah, it's like the worst kind of chain mail.
Yeah. Chain letters. Oh, brutal.
Oh, we're talking about our daughters getting into texting, and like one of the first
Yes.
things my daughter sent me was like this chain mail. I don't know, chain text, I guess. And it's
Yeah.
been
Yeah.
going around since the 70s. I was like, wow, this thing's older than I.
This is still going. It's so funny. Yeah, my daughter, I've been monitoring my daughter's texting to kind of like be like, oh, okay, here's a rude or a polite way to speak, that sort of thing. You can say this more beautiful. Maybe don't use too many acronyms. Let's like, let's expand. And I was reading one of my daughter's things, and someone had sent her like multiple of those chain letters, and she was like, don't send me these anymore. I do not want. I was like, there you go, this is it. So as soon as things bother, like say them out loud, because
Yeah,
man, get people trying to read between the lines in text is so difficult. And so I was like, this is why I write with a lot of parentheticals. But anyway, I thought it was pretty hilarious that she is 9 years old and she's already like, no, 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 we're not doing this.
boundaries,
Yeah.
boundaries. We're fans of boundaries here,
Yeah.
polite-ish boundaries.
Yeah. No chain letters. So sorry, go
Okay,
ahead. Of the views of
here we
Donald
go.
Trump.
Donald Trump, the president of the United States, has a history of speech and actions that have been viewed by scholars and the public as racist or sympathetic to white supremacy.
Mm.
Journalists, friends, family, and former employees have accused him of fueling racism in the United States. Trump has repeatedly denied accusations of racism. In 1973, Trump and his company, Trump Management, were sued by the Department of Justice for housing discrimination against African American renters. He settled the suit, entering into a consent decree to end the practices without admitting wrongdoing. From 2011 to 2016, Trump was a leading proponent of the debunked birther conspiracy theory, falsely claiming President Barack Obama was not born in the United States. In a racially charged criminal case, Trump continued to state, as late as 2024, that a group known as the Central Park Five, mostly made up of African American teenagers, were responsible for the 1989 rape of a white woman in the Central Park jogger case, despite the five males having been officially exonerated in 2002. Trump launched his 2016 presidential campaign with a speech in which he said that Mexico sends criminals to the border. Quote, they're bringing dogs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people. I could have done a Trump impersonation. Moving on. During the campaign, Trump used the fears of the white working class voters and created the impression of global danger of groups that are deemed to pose a challenge to the nation. It goes
Oh
on.
my, oh my gosh, that last sentence is so tortured within an inch of
Yeah,
its life.
I think I lost myself in it.
You can't not. That's one of the great things about reading something aloud. You're like, wait a second. This is, this is, wait, what do you mean? He used the fears of a, like, this is the funny thing. Wikipedia is, we've all realized, right? It's a biased, propagandistic compendium. Now, everything has bias, but Wikipedia especially, you read something like that, you're like, what, how would you demonstrate that objectively? That he used the fears of white working class voters. What? And it's a fascinating thing too, because you know what they don't do? They just say he's denied them. And it really, the racial views of Donald Trump, They're just like immediately get into how he's been accused of being racist. There's no, and this is it basically all that goes all the way down to the multiple other categories, but this entire intro category is only evidence of his potentially being racist. There is no evidence present. It's only accusation, right? It's only prosecution. There is no defense for any person, right, with a long history of advocacy and all sorts of areas and funding things and political fundraising over years and years and years, there would be some evidence. So this, to me, just this is, I always like to use these opportunities to go. This is how you
Well,
can
especially
tell
somebody who's been on TV for decades. I
for
mean,
for years.
craves
Yeah,
the
right.
camera. Yeah.
Yeah, and has hires people of color, works with them, elevates them, is friends with them. I like, and because this is about a person, then interpersonal racism would matter. Um, so what's fascinating is this is not an article on the racial views of Donald Trump. This is an article on accusations of racism against Donald Trump. So this is how you can immediately know, oh, this is not, because Wikipedia sort of pretends to be like the Encyclopedia Britannica, like the crowdsourced Encyclopedia Britannica or whatever. But this is one of the notable things that I started noticing, just saying as like a logician and writer and person, is like, oh, this is not what it claims to be. The title is misleading. Yeah, but the housing discrimination one is the most specifically discriminatory, which is required for racism, right? Prejudice or discrimination on the basis of race or ethnicity. That is the closest that comes to actual evidence. I would say if I was in a court of law, like admissible evidence that isn't just sort of like, it would require an interpretation of an argument. But what was essential to that, and I've looked into it, I just can't find it. I'm not saying that it exists or doesn't. I haven't read through court documents. Um, Trump was sued as representative or head of Trump Management, who owns a vast array of real estate. He's a real estate sort of inheritor slash magnate, right? That's pretty much why he was originally famous. There was no evidence that I've ever seen that Trump, for example, was the person to go, hey, you know what we got to do? We got to stop renting to black folks in this area. So what you have there is, tenably, you could have an accusation of racism against his organization. We all have borne witness to his style of management, which is certainly very involved, but it's wildly haphazard. I think everyone would agree, right? Fans and non-fans. So you'd have to then, there would have to be, there was no wrongdoing admitted by both the corporation or him. Now, is the legal system always correct? No. But there is a great example, right? I would say this is the most potent example. And this is the one I always bring up too. I was like, this is the one I've heard that could connect it to racism. And he was not found guilty of that. So then you have to go, well, wait, can we use that as establishing a pattern?
I mean,
Because
yeah,
if,
you're right. As I scan through this, it's accused of this, alleged that. I found one uh, where he was, I guess, and we should move off from this Wikipedia, but it is fascinating just
yeah,
to see because this is like rather long and it's broken up like by all these different sections.
yeah,
And
yeah.
this was
But
about
the,
black professionals in a 1989 interview with Bryant Gumbel. Um, and and again, as allegedly saying, so this is
yeah.
funny. In a 1991 book, Trumped, John O'Donnell quoted Trump as allegedly saying, that would not have passed
Yeah.
muster where I went to journalism school.
No, no.
No, but at the end of there's some stuff, and then he says, "Well, it's about wanting like people wearing yarmulkes to count as money instead of black guys." And then he says, "I think that
Yes.
guy's lazy, and it's probably not his fault because laziness is a trait in blacks." So that's interesting. First of
Yep.
all, it's alleged, so we can't really count it. But
Sure.
if he said that, I guess I'm
Yes.
suddenly curious, like, well, what would be evidence? Like, what would we
Yeah.
count as evidence of racism?
Yeah. That'd be good. Well, it would have to be evidence of uh like I would say like this is blacks. This maybe it's a fuzzy. You wouldn't say someone's a racist, but you're like, that's a little, you would say that's a bit racist, isn't it? When someone said that, right? Now, what's fascinating is we live in a culture now which makes accusations of racism harder than it ever has been in history, because uh, positive or negative attributes associated with blackness, whiteness, etc., are socially acceptable or have been socially acceptable for years, right? I mean, even in like DEI teachings, here are the essential aspects of whiteness, and some of them are negative, which then is saying it's not their fault. Just whites tend to be like objective and unfeeling or whatever, right? Which is similar to saying like blacks are lazy. So racism is so acceptable in our current society that we also have we have a strange standard here. So would that be, is it racist when someone says that like whites tend to be, favor objectivity and eschew empathy? Then basically saying white people are uncaring or unfeeling would be an interpretation. Now would that be racist, or is that like, it's a bit racist, isn't it? Just meaning like trying to establish like what is our present day community standard even. I would say both are written.
Yeah, yeah. I yeah, I think both of those are examples of racism.
Okay. Yeah. So then him saying like blacks are lazy, that would be like a racist, I would say a racist ideology, because it takes an accusation of preponderance and makes it assumes it as a definite of someone on a racial basis, right? So that would be a prejudice and be like, oh, just because he's black, then it's like he's probably been in prison. You're like, oh, okay, well, black men are disproportionately in prison, so you're not making a completely irrational statement, but you're saying that just on the basis because that dude is black, that would be racist.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah, you're analyzing a population, based on, I mean, first of all, like a fictional characteristic, which I mean, it is one way we gather statistics. So it's like, yes, we have those statistics to your point,
Yeah.
but you're kind of doubling down on the fictionality of it.
Yeah, you're essentializing race, certainly. And then so that would be an example. But for example, not being found guilty of something wouldn't be evidence of something. That would be evidence of reports of smoke, not smoke itself, to find the fire. You know what I'm saying? But the Barack Obama thing, I don't know why they would do that second. This to me assumes racism, or is so racist that assumes that if you had ever accused Barack Obama, who had a Kenyan father, um, is like, oh, maybe he's not just Kenyan. I don't know the prevalence of presidents who had foreign-born parents. Uh, maybe it's quite extensive. I don't know. I don't. It's not. I wouldn't say it's typical of the last 20 or 30 my lifetime. But I could be wrong on that. Please, anyone fact check me. So one could just say that because it's like, oh, well, he's only a first generation American. I'm skeptical of his intentions. That's not de facto racist. And it's racist for you to assume that it's racist. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That would actually be more xenophobic than anything else at best. And then there's no, because it puts up this wall of like, if anyone attacks someone for something, then it's racism. Like that really, you're like, well, but it was the first black president. Why would you bring that up? I'm like, well, who cares about whether he's black? You might care a lot about it, but we don't have to assume that everybody cares about it. It doesn't need to be enforced that everyone needs to care about it. And it doesn't need to be enforced that anyone assumes that's central.
Yeah.
So that one to me is not evidence at all. And the Central Park Jogger case, but it's calling just something, oh, it was racially charged. Who cares? That has no de facto bearing on anyone's individual adjudication, meaning the judge who found them guilty, well, that judge was super racist. No, there was coerced confessions as far as we know, out of many of them, which means the judge had confessions. Let's also be clear that the person who most likely raped that woman was Puerto Rican. So Puerto Ricans, you take the hit on this one. He confessed to it. He confessed to it anyways, years later. Confessed he was a serial rapist, terrible human being. So whether they were black or not, who cares? Who cares? Why do we assume people have to care if you got a bunch of people who were, and again, some of these same people also were guilty of other crimes at the time that were disruptive and violent, right? Some of them were involved with like They like beat some dude up and kicked him around or whatever. So again, that's not controversial. Again, a lot of this, to me, a lot of the accusations stem from people assuming everything is racist when it's about different races, which I think is really racist.
Well, that's and I am in that quandary even with some very progressive people. Like, well, wait a minute, to what extent are we like anchoring this whole problem by continuing to insist on basically splitting everybody up into races?
Yeah, and assuming it, right? Even if it's a construct, then we should reject, like if we reject whiteness, we should reject blackness. We shouldn't celebrate, if we're not celebrating whiteness, we shouldn't be celebrating blackness. So there's just I mean, to me, this is this inconsistent worldview. And of course, listen, my big bias, and I've been talking about this a lot the past couple of days online, is I generally tend to look at Democrats as very poor at adjudicating evidence as a cohort generally. And we saw this throughout COVID with like a 80 to 100 times overestimate of COVID risk. We saw this with the overestimate of, I think, up to 1,000 times overestimated or 10,000, something crazy in terms of like how many black men are killed by police. We saw this with the recent Pew poll where the majority of Democrats thought that the government response was good or excellent. And I'm just like, what are you talking about? Like these aren't evidence-based adjudications. Now, I'm not saying the Republicans are making they could just be intuitively like making slightly more rational end results without actually rationally getting there. But this is what I mean when you like this evidence is weak so far. And the Mexican thing, again, that's more nationalist or xenophobic than it is racist. Now, if Mexicans count as a race, I don't think they do, but if they count as an ethnic group, sure, you could start to be like, there's a little, but as a statement, is that untrue? Like, do Mexican people bring drugs, crime, and rape across the border? Yes, of course they do. Now, why do you have to single them out? Because I would say that would be true of pretty much everyone from every country. They're our neighbor. That's probably why. And I think there's maybe less of a concern about Canadians in terms of drugs coming across the border. I actually think we send more drugs across the border to Canada, fentanyl anyway. And
You're welcome, Ken.
yeah, you're welcome. And some are good people. I mean, that's just like a true statement. Is it tactful? Oh my goodness, no. But again, based on who Trump is, let's not assume tact is ever. Is Trump tactful? Thumbs down.
Yeah, thumbs down. We'll agree on that. Oh
Yeah,
yeah, I may
yeah.
have found the smoking gun.
Yes.
In a 2022 NPR story from All Things Considered, the January 6th committee has been uncovering what led up to the insurrection.
Mm.
Lurking beneath the hearings is a sometimes unspoken reason: race and the loss of white power.
Oh, there you go. Unspoken. Unspoken. So this is actually the theory of smoke being potentially witnessed. I mean, but again, this is where I think this is it's a semantic issue as much as everything, because it comes from the thing assuming everything's racist, but then it's talking about racism as though it's remarkable. It's powerfully confusing. It's powerfully confusing. And I'm just like, to me, again, always, and I feel like everyone should do this. What if you're sitting in a jury and this is all the evidence you have, and you have to pronounce them guilty or not guilty, and there's a sentence which includes jail time or whatever. Let's say we put racists in jail. Is there enough in the most popular things, or is there a shadow of a doubt? Because you'd kind of have to assume bad faith negotiation and all those. I would say, except for the lazy blacks thing. I'll totally happily. I don't think it's enormously racist, but it's racist. Put that in there. But again, that's an alleged quote
Right.
from a person who's been videoed extensively throughout his life. He's been captured. So again, I don't understand why there isn't a smoking gun at this point. There should be, because my goodness gracious, this dude talks a lot. He's in the first month, he answered something like 1,000 questions from press in the first month. Biden answered 100. That tells you the volume of flipping talk this guy does. And let's not pretend that this dude is phenomenally incautious in the way he speaks. How do we not have a smoking gun yet?
Yeah. Well, this may actually be our shortest episode to date, which is
Yeah.
partially due to time constraints, and also just partially due to your point, the lack of evidence. So let's call it in to a final vote. Let's be
Yeah.
that jury.
Let's be that jury. I was like, I don't like the guy, but I can't say I'd have to say he's not guilty would be my vote as a juror. I wouldn't be his peer either. I'm too broke, but
Same here. I don't like the guy, but it's astonishing that such a prevalent and adamant and they often loud claim
yes,
is not backed up by more
yes.
evidence.
And I would just as a concluding statement, because I know you got to go. The biblical standard of justice for false witness is the anyone who bears false witness is to receive the penalty due the person they're false witnessing against. So to me, whatever consequence people who call Donald Trump racist, whatever consequence they think he should deserve for that, those people deserve that consequence.
Mm.
So they think he should lose money, he should lose freedom, he should lose power. Then those people, according to the ruling of me as a juror, though anyone who says that, who just says, "Well, of course he is," they should receive that due punishment.
Well, we'll let some other jury settle that.
Yeah,
Much love to you, my friend.
love you, bro.
Take care.